is Carol Lipson. I'm the co-chair of the workshop classes. I'm with the Garden Club in Trenton. And my co-chair is Lorraine Moore back there from our Garden Club in the Philadelphia vicinity. So we've tried to curate a group of talks for you that will make it easy for you. If you're on the fence, it'll make an easy decision for you to get on the board. And for those of you who are new, hopefully this will be talks that will make it you feel comfortable that when you get there you'll know what to do. So we have some of the most talented people giving talks over the next 2 weeks. Well, we're going to start with Jennifer Fiss is going to introduce all the different chairs of the different classes, so you'll know who your chair is. And then Wendy Russell from the Garden Club of Wilmington will be giving a really good talk she gave last year, which was very comprehensive about how to enter the show from soup to nuts. And we've embellished that a little bit. She'll be giving that talk. That's the longest talk. And then Melissa Bullitt here will be talking about passing. Rolanda, this is new. Rolanda's back there. She's from Lorraine's club. We thought it would be
Philadelphia and vicinity.
Yes. We thought it would be fun, rather than just to hear it from us, have someone who's a new exhibitor say what they thought the challenges were and what things were, whether we're making this oversimplifying it or not. But she will be talking to us very briefly. And then a brand new topic, which we're all excited to hear about. And Jennifer will be talking about sustainable floristry, which how to use eco-friendly plants, how to use eco-friendly mechanics. And I think that's a process we're going to be moving to over time. It's not something where one day all of us are going to switch from everything we're used to doing. But it is something that we should start to challenge ourselves to do. And Jennifer's also going to give a I just made up a word, a smaller version of that talk next week, because there'll be different people coming next week as well who want to see that. And then Gabrielle will be, from PHS, will be going through the logistics, how to get into the convention center, where do you park, what's up with the tickets, how do you do maintenance, and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully we've covered the gamut of things. You can see it's pretty tight packed here. So if you do have questions, we should try and get them in the time slot that the person is talking. We don't have time for Q&A at the end. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jennifer.
Thank you. Where's Susanna? Oh, there you are.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Jennifer Fiss. I am Chair of Arrangements, and this is my co-chair, Susanna Hay. We're really excited to see so many people here. I want to introduce the advisors who are here today. And if you're in a class, make sure you connect so that you have, face-to-face. You guys get to know each other. If your advisor is not here, we are here to help you and talk to you. And even the advisors in other classes are always happy to answer questions, take phone calls. That's really what we're here for, to make this a great experience for you guys and to help you through the process. So we have some of our advisors at large are here. So Ann Costi, who has been at the show for many, many, many years. She's Flower Show royalty. Carol Lipson is also one of our advisors at large, and Cecilia Millay, the immediate past chair of arrangement classes. We also have our chairs of backed platforms, Susie Baum and Lorraine Moore. And our miniature arrangement advisor, Sydney Spar, is in the back. And if we have any of the people entered in the component challenge, which is class 119 interwoven, Sydney has your components for you today. So make sure you see her before you leave. And then just to tell you a little bit about what's happening with our entries, the grid is looking okay. We do have a lot of spots open, so if you have been on the fence and you're thinking about entering, come and talk to one of us and we will help you get entered. We would love to have you as part of the show. We have some good news. We have a number of new exhibitors, people who are completely new to the show this year, so that's very exciting because it's really important for us to bring new people in. So if you have friends who are great floral designers and they have maybe been a little apprehensive to enter the show, have them reach out, have them enter, or maybe you know seasoned exhibitors and they haven't done it in a while and they want to come back. Grab a friend, enter a class. We would love to have you. We have a couple new staging this year. So last year we rolled out new staging, which we called backed platform. And we don't have it here today, but it's a tall, narrow platform that lends itself to tall, narrow designs. It was a beautiful class last year, so we've rolled it out as an official real class for us. And then we also have a new medium backed pedestal over here. So our old back pedestal is now called large back pedestal, and you see that in the back. And medium here takes the place of medium niche. So we hope that this is exciting staging for you guys and some people are interested in entering. We also have some more examples of the rest of our staging, and if you have questions, we are here to answer them. Welcome.
I'm Wendy Russell. I've been arranging in the show for a couple years now, but it still feels very much like I'm a new person in this, and I can very much remember the first show I ever entered. I was saying to someone earlier, it was really nice. My first time I entered, I felt like I had people walk up to me who I never even knew, go, "You're doing a great job." And it was wonderful. I felt like I had friends that I didn't know their names, but they were really quite wonderful. So this is the easy stuff. If you can get through these 5 essential parts, you are halfway or more to making a successful arrangement. So please read the schedule. We're going to say it about 7 times today. No bugs, or no remnants of a bug, or evidence of a bug. If you're worried about it, take it out. No plant diseases. Again, if it looks a little funny, don't use that piece of material. You have a not permitted list in the schedule. Please pay attention to that. If you have a concern that your thing is kind of maybe not permitted, check with your advisor. And identify all your plant material. I can't tell you how many times I've been on the show floor and someone's running around with a flower and their phone and going, "Does anyone know what this is?" Figure it out beforehand. One of the things that I meant to say at the beginning, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the process, or mostly about the process. And I'm gonna use some examples of entries that I've done where I've totally messed things up. I've made mistakes, or I've gotten to the show and there's unexpected things that you would never have imagined could have been there. Because I do think this is you're kind of winging it when you do this. You know, it's like skiing down a ski slope, and you just don't know what that ski conditions are going to be like. So just ride with it, have fun, but don't be surprised if what you think is going to happen doesn't happen. Sort of put on your big girl pants and keep going. So one of the things that I think is particularly important in Philadelphia, because the conditions on the show floor are really hard for plant material. I mean, they are really tough on plant material. All these people come in, they touch it, it's dry, it's hot, it's cold, it's windy, it's everything. So, no, you're good. So make sure your material is what's called conditioned. I remember the first time I entered a show, this old lady came up to me and she goes, "Wendy, you really need to know how to condition." And I was like, I don't even know what that word means. But it's just getting your plant material in as good, strong condition as you can. Make sure it's well hydrated, you've got it in water, or pick tough as nails plants. Pick plants that maybe they don't even need water. Pick plants that are tough and can sustain that show floor, because it is hard on plant material. A ranunculus, forget about it. Don't spend $4 on a ranunculus, because it'll fall apart in about 3 hours. So be careful of your plant material. And experiment with the plant material. Leave it on your window for 3 days and see if it makes it for 3 days. Put it in that sunny, over the heater on your windowsill where it gets hot and cold, and see how it does. And again, know your plants. Know every single piece of foliage that you're going to use. You're tucking a little bit of moss in to hide your mechanics. That goes on your plant list. So again, I think we've all said this so many times. That exhibitor guide, every page of it is really your walkthrough guide. Use it underline it, take it apart, reread it. And you have to fulfill the requirements exactly. Melissa will talk a little bit this about passing, but exact. Measurements matter. We'll talk about this a little bit, but know all your rules. Even in the exhibitor guide, sometimes the arrangement class people overlook it. There, on page 6 and 7, there's some general rules about being at the show. Pay attention to those. Don't guess what's meant. If you don't know it, ask your advisor. That said, if it doesn't prohibit it in the schedule, you can do it. So be creative, push it a little bit, but it's only what's in that schedule that goes. And again, we talked about don't use any of the prohibited materials. Next. We'll talk about this in another slide. Check your depth, your width, your height. Most of these arrangements don't have height restrictions. Play with that when you make your arrangement. The convention center floor is enormous, like the ceiling is 3 miles above you. It's this vast, huge space. And you can get there and your arrangement looks stunning on your kitchen table or kitchen counter. Now looks like it's about this big. So use that height, play with that in order to fill what this enormous scale, the enormous scale of the space that you're given. Make sure you know all the installation and removal requirements, the times. Pay attention to your time. Time yourself making your arrangement. Time yourself unloading your car. We'll talk about that. And anything that's unfamiliar, if it's a sort of a flower arranging word like synergistic, you don't know what that means, ask your class advisor. I think the first, when you approach this thing of reading the schedule, remember that your class title sort of sets the scene, gives you an idea, but don't get so wrapped around the axle about that title that you don't make a good design. Because what really matters, we'll talk about again, is that it's a good design, that it holds together, doesn't look like it's off balance. It's in scale with the space, the materials in proportion. Don't try to whack the judges over the head with your intent. Can't you see that I can't think of a class this year, but we'll talk about it in another one. Pay attention to your pedestal and background color. You can now get little cans of test paint, make a mock, paint it, get the real paint material. A little hint, at some paint stores you can buy the paint for considerably less than a regular can would cost. They take out all of the chemicals that make paint hold up outside or inside for years. So if they take out all that stuff, it only costs like $5 a can for paint. So you can get the paint, bring it home. We've talked about the staging. And think about what's behind your exhibit. I'll show you a picture later. Some of the spaces are open. Are they all open now? Are there still some totally open spaces, or is everybody have a background?
Open platform is
Open. Open's open. That's a open platform is the one class that I think about that a lot, where you go and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm right in front of that, and it's distracting. So think about that space. Sometimes you can again ask your class advisor, or you can go look at old pictures from the show to get a sense of what might be there. We'll talk about this again also in another picture. If you're interpreting an object or a poster, think about where it is in relationship to your exhibit. One of the things that I think is interesting, they said in Western cultures, because we tend to read left to right, visually, designs make sense in our heads if you read them from right to left. Does that make sense? So if your poster is on the right and your design is on the left, think about how that visually is going to read. Or is your poster on the left? So knowing that will help you design I think can be helpful when you approach your setting up your design, and we'll show a picture later about that too. So this is an example of a design that I did. And this is the class description. So I took you take this apart, look at every single component of it. So this was a futuristic design. What the heck is a futuristic design? I think I had an idea that it actually wasn't a formal definition. I had my height and size of my this was essentially a platform, it was a table. I knew my width and depth. Sometimes you can take even a piece of paper, like packing paper, and cut it out in a circle, and then take the circle away so you have just the ring that's left. Put that on your table, and you can lift it up around your arrangement to make sure it's 30 inches or whatever the diameter all the time. And just lay it on your paper, on your table when you're working, and bring it up. It works, bring it down, and keep going. Also, how many sides is it viewed from? This one was viewed from 3 sides. We'll talk about that a little bit. It actually can come up quite a bit. I think it comes up in Galleria because not a lot, but some arrangers forget the back. And even though you can't get to the back and see the back, visually you know what's behind there, and sometimes that flatness can disrupt your design. So next picture. There's the picture. Okay. So that's the design. This was made out of lucite sticks and sycamore bark. So I spent a long time trying to figure out what the heck does water look like? Like, I don't know what water looks like. What color is water? And I was walking the dog, and I walked by a sycamore tree, which looks like water vertically. So I just turned it and twisted it horizontally. And then I found a picture in a magazine, and I was like, oh, those are all the colors of water. And I just went to the hardware store and bought spray paint cans that were all those different colors. The hardware man was like, well, what are you doing? You can see here at the bottom, I had a ruler, because I had a 36-inch table height. So I was looking at my design in that space. This was approximately the right size at my table, so I knew if I was working in that, I was going to get it. This is where you get to the show, and it's not quite the way you think it is. Okay? So there was this enormous palm tree behind the entries. So they were all in a circle of 4, and there's a palm tree in the middle. Well, you can't imagine how disruptive that was. So I ran to the Michaels it was like I ran to a shopping mall, to a Michaels, and bought a piece of poster board because I had no idea what to do. The table height wasn't the right height. It was actually only 30 inches high. So I don't know if you can see it, but it was all sort of squat, and it messed it up. I couldn't do a darn thing about it. I actually asked them if I could put blocks. When I was at Michael's, I bought bed risers and asked them if I could use the bed risers at the bottom of the table to raise it back up to the right height, but they wouldn't. I was like, you said 36, and this is only 30, but they wouldn't let it go. And I bought a tablecloth because it was just such an ugly table, and it wasn't prohibited in the schedule.
This wasn't a Philadelphia Flower Show.
No. We're gonna get to the errors at the Philadelphia.
We got this a little better.
We're gonna get to ones though. Next one. So ask. If it doesn't say it, ask. Get your idea set in the context of the rules, and also I think the availability of materials. March is in some ways a great time for plant material, but in some ways it's very limiting. Your palette is very narrow in terms of the plants that you can buy or afford. So don't try to make let me try to think of something. Sunflowers, right? You might not find nice sunflowers. So don't get into a sunflower thing if the plant's not going to be available. Are there particular plant materials or colors that evoke the scene that you want? There are some, roses are romantic. You just can't get past that. Sunflowers are happy. You want a happy design? Go that way. And we'll talk about you'll see some examples later, the same thing. Again, if you're not sure what that class title means, we'll talk about this in another slide. Ask the thing. And really integrating not only your components and your flowers and your colors and textures, all of those things pull into your intent. So if you're trying to evoke a mood You're trying to respond to the class title. All of those things matter, not just some little accessory that you stuck in the corner of it to say, see my intent? I put that little accessory there. It's the whole picture that brings the thing. The next one. So this is a class that was called Straight and Crooked. I mean, that's right. So even in the Tillandsias have that straightness. And this is just an aside, I don't have a slide of it. Take a look at this piece of wood and this black plexi thing. This is where your basement comes in handy, because things come back to be reused. Next one. Oh, actually, one little quick thing. See how I put a brown base on this? Because I was given a black table. And I thought if I had a black table, it would lose that black slit thing. So I used a brown instead.
Wendy, what is the black thing again?
So that's those are pieces of plexiglass. So this is black plexi and 3 pieces of clear plexi, and I just glued them together to make a structure. But I personally like using plexi because I like having my designs float. I think they're more powerful when they float. I think when you put things in a vase, it's like, it's like wearing two big boots. So I like having my designs float.
So, this is kind of like maybe my third class. So, is that okay that it's not natural wood or?
So that is a real piece of wood.
Okay, I meant the plexi. Does that have to be?
Is it if it's not in the schedule? Yeah. No, you don't. You can use. There's no prohibition against using other materials. I mean, a vase, it's a ceramic,
Okay.
So, what you can't use is a shell, a bone, a feather,
Okay.
those things. Okay.
Wendy, another thing I think you were mentioning, someone asked, where Wendy's saying that the table she was given was black. A lot of the classes, you're allowed to put another tile. Like I've done that often. So say you didn't like the gray and it didn't look great with your arrangement. You could go to Home Depot and buy a piece of marble or a piece of linoleum and make sure it's cut right and put it on top so that your piece looks different, which is what you were kind of
That's
saying.
so. I was kind of stuck. They didn't tell me it was black. I didn't ask. I got there. The show was at black. I was like, oh. So.
It tends not to look good as when people drape fabric down and, that's kind of stuff. But if you just want to change the color of the top.
We'll show you'll see some pictures again where I've manipulated the tops a little bit. So I think you really are trying to aim to spark the viewer's imagination. You're not trying to whack them over the head with your idea. Interpret things figuratively or metaphorically, not literally. We'll talk about that with another thing. Avoid relying on that accessory, that little gnome in the corner of your design. And don't be too literal. So this is an example of a design that I did for Philadelphia. And it was Wuthering, the title of the class was Wuthering Heights. This was when it was Britain, was the theme for the show. And I never read Wuthering Heights in high school, and I didn't know what it was about. And so I was like, oh, it's a book, right? It's a book. So I'm making an arrangement in a book. Honest. And this woman, this older, very talented woman went, oh no, honey. Oh no. And I got one of those, it was flowing out of a book, right? So I finally got on, so I Googled it. I didn't know what the book was. And you can go through a Google and you can pick up some words that give you that metaphorical, that emotional response to what the book is. So romantic, gothic, moorland, sullen, inhospitable. Okay? That's where the design should be. It shouldn't be a book. Next one. So, what do the moors of England look like? They look like that, right? Is that sullen, inhospitable, romantic, a little, right? Next one. And this is where I went with the design. I think that sort of evoking an emotional response. This is an example of plant material that is rock hard solid. There is one piece of live plant material, that begonia, is the only thing that's alive in there. Oh no, and the bird of paradise, but that will live for like a month out of water. And so that begonia's in a little water tube, and everything else is dry. So
is that vertical?
So you were given you were just given a post, and I think it had a square top on it. So everything was just like came off of that pedestal thing. This is a good example of your staging plant material, your plant staging color too.
Did you dry the plant material yourself?
No, I just got it some from the basement. Some was found. So this is an old bird of paradise leaf that I still have. This has been a long time. It's still in my basement. I still use it a lot. These were banana sticks. You'll see it actually come in another design. They lived for about 10 years in my basement. The black pussy willow was in the backyard. There's an old hunk of tar that somebody was tarring a roof, and they threw it in the woods, and it was kind of cool. An old piece of wood, lots of old pieces of wood. This is Poncirus. That's a fun piece of plant material to use if you're trying to evoke a mood, of thorns or. So it was just, honestly, it was found stuff from the basement of the yard or the side of the road. And a friend of mine lived in Florida. She brought me back that bird of paradise when she came back up from Florida. So.
And was the bird of paradise, was that treated in any way?
Mm-mm. No, it's just the black ones.
Mm-hmm.
You can get them. They're not easy to find, but they're fun. They're fun to use. Again, it evokes a mood. It's a piece of plant material that has an impact on you visually.
And how did you connect those? Was it just glue? Was it?
I think it was all stuck in foam. I think I had a piece of foam and just stuck all the pieces in there.
Wow.
There's a little bit of, it was all pretty much foam. And so when I plunked it in, that's where it is. This was an old piece of the Kentucky coffee tree pod, Kentucky coffee pod that I found inside the road. So when you're many of these classes interpret art, whether it be a sculpture or an image. Again, you want to copy the emotions, not the art itself literally, and really look at the lines and the colors and the textures, those elements that you have in a design that are also in the piece of art, and repeat them. You don't have to match the period of the art. So if you're looking at a very, Dutch master painting, you don't have to make a traditional Dutch master arrangement. And again, it's that visceral reaction that you have, and capturing the viewer's interest and their attention. So this was one in Philadelphia a couple years ago, and we were given a poster, and this was the poster I was given. This was Homer's it's called Northeaster. It's a lovely painting, and there's a lot of stuff going on in here. So I've got colors, I've got curves, I've got textures, and this is where I went with it. Again, all rock solid, hard plant material, very similar to the Wuthering Heights one, in fact. And in fact, a lot of the plant material is repeated. Here's that same bird of paradise leaf, like 2 years later. The same banana sticks, the same begonia, not the same one, but stuck in one piece of one water tube. I even got, and I don't think the judges knew it, but it's kind of, this is seaweed that I got off the beach. I think I've told people this story. I love it. My brother lives in Maine, so the flower show's in February, March, right? So I called my brother in January, February. I'm like, can you get me some seaweed? And he goes, do you know how effing cold it is up here? And I'm like, yeah, can you get me some seaweed? So he goes out to the, he had to wait till the ice left. Goes out to the end of the thing. He's picking up seaweed, and some woman goes, can I ask you what you're doing? And he goes, I'm getting seaweed for my big sister. And she goes, you are a very good brother. So here's an example of taking that pedestal. You're given a specific pedestal height. I didn't want it. So I made a plexiglass riser, which brought my design up, which helped in that huge Galleria space, and it made my design float. So you can manipulate whether it's a new piece of color or you can change your thing.
I'm sorry, you added the pedestal or you added the?
So this is a piece of plexi
Right.
that I got cut, and I put 4 tubes, in fact, the same kind of tubes that were in that other one.
Right, right.
And there's another plexiglass top to that, and then I rested the whole thing on top of that.
Plexi tube.
So the plexiglass place, you can buy all kinds of different plexi. You can buy it in tubes and strips and flat pieces. They don't bend it, but, so you can buy tubes and cut them. You'll see it, I actually use it I don't know if there's another design, but I use those tubes a lot. Yeah, there is another design with the tube, I think.
This one down, no, down.
It's third and they're very nice.
Oh, everything.
Everything plastic.
Everything plastic.
So, next one. And this is an example of not knowing the space very well. So this, and here's the right left, the reading from reading left to right, so that poster works with the design. But when I got there, this thing was like, it was so tiny. It looked so small. And the arranger next to me had a huge arrangement, and it just looked like a bedside table arrangement. So what I did was I pushed the poster as far back as I could and brought the pedestal as far forward as I could. So visually it looked bigger. But it was, in my view, it was very diminutive for the space. And that's just where I just messed, didn't think well enough. Next one.
I just have one question. What class is this where you have the image that you have to interpret?
So that was what was called Galleria. I don't know that you have, do you have a poster class?
Where in the world? I don't know what number it is. We transported that.
First Friday, 125.
Did you put things in at the end? Because it has a lot of.
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. I had sort of the core. We'll talk a little bit about transporting. I had sort of the core stuff together, and this is where practicing helps. Because you're like, okay, how am I going to put that piece together? Take photographs of your thing, so you're like, where did that? You're holding a stick, and you're like, where did I put that? So take photographs of your arrangement at home so you can remember. But yeah, the core was done, and then I sort of knew exactly how to put all this stuff together. But we'll talk about when it screws up and you don't have that. So here's another example. So this is 3-dimensional art. It was a 2D art. This was where you're supposed to interpret a building in Pennsylvania, built after I forget what the date of it. So this is Children's Hospital in West Philly. And so I thought that was, first of all, I hated using a building because how do you make a flower arrangement that's square? Like, it's so ugly. So I had to find a round building. So that was my round building. And I think I just Googled round buildings in Philadelphia. I think that's how I came upon this picture. Next one. And this is where I went with it. Again, here's your plexi tubes. Here's your plexi tubes. So this was a design. Again, it's rock solid, hard material. Those callas don't need to be in water, so that it could all stay. These are those animal balloons. So I thought it played a little bit on the children's hospital. I thought it captured the color, and I thought that translucent sort of pretty color of those balloons helped. But that's just, again, it's almost the same as the other one where it had a square.
So how much did the balloons cooperate with?
I tested them. And in fact, a very good designer came up to me and goes, "Are you sure those balloons are going to stay?" She thought they'd deflate. I'm like, "They're going to stay. I've been testing them for weeks." So this, where are we on time? This is another fun. Am I good?
You're good.
So my son at the time was about 12. And I was working on this. I just had the balloons. I didn't have any flowers. So first he goes, "Oh, this is supposed to be a flower arrangement, Mom. There's no flowers in here." And I said, "Okay, And I said, "I'm trying to figure out how to make these 2 rings wide like the building, because I didn't want it to look square. I wanted it to look wide." And so I was trying to pull it as far to the edges of those plexi as I could. And he goes, and so I had a tube in each corner, right? That's how I figured I could get as far and wide as I could. And he goes, oh, Mom, you are tutting it. And I said, what the heck is tutting? And he goes, you know, in Egyptian art, you see everybody exactly at a right angle, and it's flat and it's boring. He says, that's tutting. He said, pull your corners in just a little bit, and it'll be more interesting to look at. Does that make sense? And it was just more it was not so rigid and stiff.
Does he want to enter the flower?
And then I thought my kid was brilliant. I mean, we all think our kids are brilliant, right? So that's where I thought that was a great concept of tutting it to sort of loosen yourself up. And I'm making this hard.
Can you go back to the building before?
Yeah, sure. And I'm not copying that building, but I'm evoking. You can almost see them when they overlap. And this is an example. I got to pick which picture of the building I wanted, so I actually found the architect's originally rendering, because you drive this on a day like today, it does not look like this building, right? But the architect's rendition brought all those colors out. So I used that photograph, not just a regular street photo. So these are, again, it's probably the same piece of plexi. A square plexi base. I had them cut rings. And this is where I had a width restriction. So I couldn't go really, really wide. And then I just glued it together. And then what I did, I think you could actually see a tiny, tiny hint of it. Under these red discs, I had water tubes that I glued to the underside. There's no water in them, but they were holding my stem of the calla steady so that I could get that wrap. And then I just glue dotted the callas on. And one of the judges, I think you said this too, Allison, said that she wished that one calla had been back up. See how it sort of came down a little bit to keep that ring.
Who cut your plexi for you?
The nice people on 3rd and Spring Garden. I think they don't like when I come anymore. They're like, oh, is it March?
But the red and yellow
The red disc.
is plexiglass also?
Yeah, they have a sale bin, like a scrap bin,
Oh,
and I
yes.
found some discs, and I was like, oh, those are kind of cool.
Did you paint them?
No, they come red plexi. You can get some of the plexi
Then
comes
what
in
is
different
the
colors.
yellow?
The yellows are the callas. Yellow callas.
Yeah.
It's a reflection.
It's a reflection.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So what kind of glue did you use on the flower that it didn't?
Glue dot. Just a glue dot. Just a glue dot. Glue dot. It's like the things that they put the credit cards on when you get them in the mailers. You know, that you peel off.
Do you use the weight of the plexi to level it, or do you put them together with glue or anything?
So I use a special plexi glue
Okay.
that is. Well, it's not. It's kind of toxic. Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't. But it's like you have to practice a little bit. I use a pin. I apply it with a squirt bun with a pin and just a tiny drip of it. And once it's on, and it marks the plexi if you take it off. It leaves like a. So it's a one and done, and you know. In fact, I think you can see a little glue dot there peeling up from the balloon. So one of the things that I think is really important, and it's in the exhibitor guide, is this idea of a scale of points. And it's what the judges use to decide how your arrangement, whether it's successful or not. And I think it's extremely important to pay attention to it and not get distracted by the class title and the intent. Because when you look at the scale of points for Philadelphia, next one, this is the scale of points, except for, I think, miniature. I think miniatures is a little bit different. But if you look at this is what matters. This doesn't matter as much. So don't get all wrapped around your intent. Make it a good design. Because if it's creative, if it's a good design, if it's nice, clean, and well executed, it doesn't really even matter if you got the intent. right? From the scale of points. This is, if you didn't even pay any attention to intent, you'd get a red. That's 80 points. That's a red. So don't lose sight of the importance of the good design. I can't say that enough, right? Some of the common pitfalls that I think we have all had is that how many who've entered flower shows have gotten the comment, your container is out of proportion to your design, right? All the time. And that's actually why I hate containers, because I'm like, forget it. I can't get it right. Your water source leaks. Anybody had that one? I know the pastors and the committee have walked into the show floor and found a little puddle that they didn't expect the next morning, right? The balance is off. The design looks like it's going to fall over a little bit. It's very subtle. Sometimes by taking a photograph of your design and looking at it, you can see it just looks like it's listing a little bit. That's important. The plant material isn't in as good condition. We talked about this in the gallery at the back. Pay attention to the back of the arrangement, even if you don't, the judges won't see it. Finish your design all the way through. The mechanics, are visible. That's an obvious one. The space around the design is not pristine, even though those of you who are class advisors will say, oh, don't worry about the marks on the thing. If you can have a little bit of paint, like those makeup pads, and just clean up your space a little bit. It keeps your eye from being distracted by those little scuff marks and things. And obviously it doesn't conform to the schedule. A little bit about how the judges approach your design when they come. So there's a judging panel of 3 people. They will judge your design as it looks when they walk onto the show floor. So if between passing and judging, that flower falls over, it falls over. So it's as it looks. That's why taking account to how your plant material folds up. I've had plant material that looks great in the car when I loaded it, and by the time I'm into passing, it's already fading. So know what the views are from which your exhibit's going to be judged. You're going to get 2 comments typically. They're usually brief, and the intent of them is one to talk about how you shined, what you did really well, and how you could improve the arrangement. So you'll get that. And the decision of the team is final. They can't, even if you're really sad, PHS can't change the award. Next one. Even if they made a mistake, and they make mistakes. Even if they made a mistake. We all, right? This is the way it is. It's fun. And keep saying to yourself, this is supposed to be fun. Right? They are referring to what's called the elements and principles of design. I don't know if they list them in the exhibitor guide. So things like balance, scale, proportion. Is your design adhere to those principles of design? And have you applied the elements, color, line, texture, to those principles? And they really do, this is why judging can take so long. They really do pay a considerable amount of attention to crafting those comments in a way that you get and that the public understands. So that I think is the hardest part of being a judge, is getting those comments, capturing that thing in one sentence. The awarding of ribbons. So there is only one first given in a class. More than one honorable mention can be given. If a class is not worthy of a first, it doesn't have to be given. And likewise for the other colors. And very rarely would they withhold a ribbon. It's not nice. But if it's warranted, that would happen. You will also see on the show floor turquoise ribbons, which are a class combination, which meant all these guys did a rock star job, and you will get the entire class gets a turquoise ribbon. That's a little, you can puff yourself up if you see that too. They're only awarded though in a class in which every entry ribbons. So, getting ready for the show. I think we've talked about this ad nauseum. Recheck that darn schedule, check your times, when are you supposed to be there, how many traffic jam, check the, ways, get the traffic. It's amazing how many trucks can turn over at 5 a.m. on the Schuylkill. Get your nomenclature sheet, we'll talk about this, completed and done ahead. You can always take something off if you ended up not using it, if it died, if it looks terrible. And think through every single thing you need. So this is what's nice about practicing. If you're practicing at home and you had to get a step stool to get, like I had to get a step stool for that Wuthering Heights one, pack the step stool. And have a plan before you get there on how you're going to keep your material in good condition. So order extras, have a backup stuff, have a plan for how you're going to keep your arrangement in good condition throughout the show. Next one. Here's the nomenclature sheet that you're given. This is actually last year's, but this year's looks similar. So up at the top, you're gonna know your class number. You're gonna know your PHA ID. Your advisor can give you those numbers, and you'll get the letter. Are you entry A, B, C, or D? And then circle all your arrangements. Make sure, again, you get every little piece of plant material, including the moss that hides the thing in the back. If you're unsure what the names are to the thing, your advisor can help you on that. And if there's a blank at the bottom, so if you can't find it, you can write it in. Next one. So this is an example of an arrangement, and in fact, talk about stuff in the basement. See this thing here? That's the thing that was in the straight and crooked, the same piece of plexi. So this is an exhibition table. I think you have an exhibition table this year. So this is designed using utensils and eating supplies that are used in a design, but not implied for the use of eating. So some good IKEA black dishes, and again very similar, rock solid plant material, callas. They don't need to be in water, so I didn't have to have a vase. Thank goodness, it was going to be too big. And then they're just stuck in the holes. But this class was called On the Road. And I drove out down Pennsylvania Turnpike to the show, and I got there, and I'd left my intent at home. And didn't download a copy of it to my phone, and I had to drive back down the Pennsylvania Turnpike home to get my little intent that was sitting on the kitchen table because I didn't have everything prepared. I'm getting a call, and then of course I hit rush hour traffic at Fort Washington, which was a mess. And I'm getting calls like, are you coming? We see some of your stuff here, but are you coming? And thank goodness it was a design that was pretty easy to put together at the last thing. But I forgot my intent. I didn't pack my stuff correctly. Totally crazy. And I needed it. I couldn't get by without it. So, next one. This is, we talked about this. Are you going to make your design completely on the show floor? I would encourage you not to do that unless it's something like that, 3 callas in the box. Try to practice maybe partially arranged or your mechanics set ahead of time. Packing your stuff is really important. I can't tell you how many potholes I discovered happen in February that I didn't realize until you got down there and you're driving and your stuff in the back of the car. There's lots of creative tricks that you can use to secure your plant material in your car. And also think about how you're packing your car so that what comes out first, what comes out second. Next one. There are some fun, all kinds of tricks. Boxes help. Pack boxes inside of boxes. To do your plant material, get it all wedged. Next one. I love this system. This is great. This is a grid. You can buy this grid with tubes and pack everything in there tight. I use this all the time for a port pictures in the show, but it's great. Nothing's tipping over in the car. Next one. You can get really creative and do a Google search. Here's from the Mortuary Mall website. They're a little pricey, but here's some flower trays for holding your designs, but you can make the same idea. Next one. Here's an example of a design from Philadelphia. So this, remember the stick? Remember the stick, the crooked and straight stick? There's the stick again, like 5 years later. So this is an example where they talked about know your background. This is the open platform. Oh, look at that background. It's so confusing. There's nothing you can do about it. Absolutely nothing. But you might say, I need bolder plant material. I can't get through. So this is a packing thing. So these were 3 strips of plexi that were just glued at the bottom. So they were kind of like this a little bit, right? And the stick is kind of holding things together at the top, but not really. So I had made those pucks of moss that had foam in them. Those were all done at home. And I found that the Costco box of trash can bags was exactly the distance from here to here. So I packed a cardboard box between those things so that they didn't wrap the entire thing with towels and duct tape so it was not moving. I made the whole arrangement, and the last thing before the passers did is I clipped the tape, took the towels, and slid that out so that those things were not going to wiggle. Because once they wiggled, the glue came off, it broke, it marked, it was done. But there's an example of pack, tight your stuff.
So how, the vertical plexi,
Mm-hmm.
how did you get? Did you work on both sides of that? Was there a hole in there that they went
I drilled holes. I drilled 3 holes.
Uh-huh.
It was 3, 2, and 3. And then I took Oasis, which we won't use anymore, and wrapped it in moss, and that was wet. And I dipped it in wax at the bottom so it didn't drip. So it had a cup of wax, right, moss, and then I could impale all my plant material in it. Does that make sense? So I'd make a ball, dip it in wax, so it's like got a cup. Now it's got a built-in cup. The whole thing's wet, right? And then I picked plant material that it was kind of tough. You know, freesias are pretty tough. They're not going to, I think there was a magnolia bloom up there that budded out nicely. But it was pretty much tough plant material too that needed. Okay, next one.
So the blooms on there were alive.
Yeah. I think we've talked about that. A cart is very helpful. I'm not supposed to say that, but sometimes I'll make my arrangement down in the parking lot and then bring it up because that show floor is kind of chaotic and it makes me nervous. But you can use this space around your car to make some of your design if you need to. A grooming kit. Ask if you haven't gotten something. It's amazing how many people have extra glue dots or extra pieces of something or snippers or something. And I think that's one of the nicest things about the show is you have people that'll come and say, here, I have an extra.
And we also have a toolbox that the arrangement advisors have access to as well.
So we've talked about all this. Next one. So this is an example when the unexpected happens. So this was a flower show one. It was called the Prime Meridian. That was the class title. So this was the sculpture on the Prime Meridian at Greenwich. So I copied it in Plexi. This is where the guys won't let me come back anymore. And I made a design, and the design in the class schedule called for on 2 pedestals that are 36 and 24. So milk crates are perfect, 36s and 24. So I had it all together. It looked great, I thought. Right, it's all hanging together. I get to the show, and the pedestal heights were not that height. One was 42 instead of 36. So when I put my thing together, it broke. And that glue fell, blah, blah, blah. And I lost my ring. I lost all my stuff. I lost my composure. And somebody came up to me and she said, for you guys who know her, she said, well, what would Pinky do? Pinky is a fabulous arranger who's been around forever. Well, what would Pinky do? And you just do it, you just winged it. And it did fine. It was fine. But that's an example. Sometimes you get to the show and it's not what they said it was. So.
We really work hard so that is not.
And they were very nice. They were very, while I was having a meltdown, people were very kind and nice. Melissa will talk about this again, but I have to say your pastors are your friends. They are really there to make your design shine. They're not there to critique your design or criticize you. And you don't have to take their advice, but dang, it's pretty good sometimes.
And what's a pastor?
Melissa will talk a little bit about that. It's a person who checks to make sure you conform to all the rules. And they might say things that you could make better. They're not supposed to change your design. They're not supposed to say, oh, you didn't interpret that right. They're supposed to say things like, your mechanics are showing. So, next one. Oh, and this is important. I'm sorry. When you're done passing, leave the show. Do not stay in the show when the judges are in there. I think we've all been guilty of hiding behind
The minis.
to look, you know. But really, leave the show floor. It's just not fair to the judges to feel that they have people watching their every move as you see them go. Next one. You know, I think this is the thing. This is really, it is fun. It is a lot of fun. It's stressful. It's crazy. But if you keep in mind being a good sport and having a good time, be on time. This show committee is working their butts off to make everything work. So be respectful of them. There are a lot of steps that have to happen after you leave that show floor. So be respectful. The show floor space can be tight. You have a little table. You have a designated space. Keep your stuff to your space. The person next to you is just as nervous and just as stressed as you are. So be kind to them and keep your stuff organized. We've said this 3 times, reread the schedule. And I think this is important. Don't blame the show committee that pedestal was 42 inches when it's your responsibility to make sure you've got it all together, and it's your responsibility if it's not together to deal with it. Just flow with it. I think this helps when you're making your design. We talked about this, if you take something away, is it going to make it better? If I add this, is it really going to do something? So sometimes taking away, removing can make a design. Is the base, is the container important and integral component, or is it just my water vessel? If it's just your water vessel, it might not always work. I think fewer, and I think you can see it in my design, I think fewer is better than more. I can't make a big traditional arrangement. I just mess it up. And plus it costs a fortune. So I think sometimes fewer components strengthens your message. And I think for those of you who have been arranging before, it's not a whole bunch of the coolest new techniques you saw on Instagram, of weaving or braiding plant material or gluing something in a weird way. It's just all about a good design. I think this is important. I know that we could miss this, but I do think it's important at the end of the show, after you've gotten your kitchen cleaned back up again, to really take a look at what your design looked like after, when you come back the next morning, and say, is there something that wasn't necessary or didn't make sense? Was there a distraction in there? Was it really a new, unique, fresh approach? Are there elements that were not well integrated, like that cowl that dropped down a little bit on that one design? Did you really successfully, did they get, they did not get it. They did not get what I'm doing. Well, maybe you didn't communicate your message appropriately, or effectively, rather. Did your plant material stay perfect? If it did, use it again. That's why it shows those same plants, those same sticks, those same things show up in every design because they work. And then look at the comments after you answer these questions for yourself. Don't dwell on don't fixate on the comments. And keep records, because you'll see a trend and you'll see yourself get better and you'll see yourself respond to where you had problems in the past. That's it. Do they any other questions?
Thank you, Linda. That was a great presentation. But would you do me a favor and go back to your futuristic design and water and explain the staging of that?
The one with the sycamore bark?
The blue sycamore.
Sure. So those were my plexi tubes. They were all glued onto a plexi base. There was little bits of space between them. I had little wedges that were in the scrap bin at the plexi store, so there were little spaces. And I took sheets of sycamore bark and I soaked them so that they were flat and pressed them flat. And when they were still wet and flat, I spray painted just one side because I wanted that curl. I didn't want them to all be painted. I wanted that natural curl to show. And then when they dried, they almost returned to their curl. And then I just slipped them all in there. There's a few strategically placed glue dots that hold it onto the thing. But it's so no water. Lasts forever. I drove it all the way to Erie, Pennsylvania. I drove it to Erie in the back of the car, leaned over, not packed very well. And it made it for 4 days. So that was that's really where you play with your plant material, know your plant material, experiment with what you can do. Any other?
What time could we get down there? I missed the first
We'll be
part.
going over that at the end.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right.
You can see we asked an experienced flower arranger. I don't want you guys, sometimes it's cool to see what Wendy does, but probably not something you're going to do that advanced the first or second time that you do. So if you're new, don't get intimidated by how unique and wonderful her things are, but get inspired. And I always try and think about, like, even if you walk away with acrylic, think about how maybe acrylic could be used or things like that. And don't tell them Wendy sent you, right?
And don't go 2 days before the show.
Yeah, that's true too. Next is Melissa Bullitt, who's going to talk about passing. And I'll let, rather than me saying more about it, I'll let you. Thank you.
Hello. Okay, so I am the chair of passing, Melissa Bullitt. And we talked a little bit about preparing for the show. Then we moved on with Wendy how to prepare for your design and execute your design and some tips for doing that. So there's one more, and she did actually talk a little bit more about judging, which is another step in the process. But there's one in the middle, and that's what I want to talk about, and that's called passing. So I call this, so you think you finished your design, now what? Okay, and that's where the passing comes in. So you've done everything, your design is finished. You can't just walk away. There's another step that you have. Okay, so you're almost done. You've finished your design, and that's when what we call the passers come. And what is it? Why are we doing passing? So basically, it's just another step to prepare your design for the judges to come. So it's an extra set of eyes. It's usually 2 people, 1 or 2 people looking at your design. And we're just making sure that the design looks its best and that it follows the rules, especially for your specific class. So that's where this little exhibitor's guide comes in handy. Okay, so you're going to want to look at the general rules of the show. Okay. And then you're also going to want to look specifically on page 13 of what is permitted and what is not permitted, generally in the show. And then additionally, you should look at your class description because occasionally they will say, accessories permitted or accessories not permitted, or it'll say must use fresh plant material or must use dried plant material, that kind of thing. So that's what you need to know specifically, and that's what the passers are going to look for. So if you have forgotten that your class says fresh plant material only, and you show up with Wendy's design that is dried plant material, the passers will not be able to pass your design unless you place at least 1 item that is fresh in your design. And you don't want to be frantically running around the show floor at 8:25 saying, oh darn, I need some fresh plant material. Someone will probably lend it to you, but 8:25 is maybe not the best time to be looking for your plant material. So that's where this comes in handy, okay? And that is what the passers are there for. So the passers are looking for some of the same things that judges will be looking for. So by following the passers' advice, they are trying to save you from getting point deductions that the judges might be giving you later on. Okay, we're looking for the things that the judges are looking for, some of these things. So if you look on the scale of points on page 13, there's 1 for arrangements and 1 for minis. Things like distinction, conformance, and even part of the design, they are all things that the passers are looking at. So conformance is like, did you follow the schedule? Did you follow the size things? Did you use fresh plant material? Distinction is sort of like, are your mechanics visible? Is your plant material looking fresh? Is it, does it have bugs on it? That sort of thing. So if we say to you, is this the best rose that you have available? And you say, well, I don't have any other ones. So the passers will, in that case, have to pass you, but the judges will then come along and say, oh, that plant material doesn't look very fresh. I'm going to deduct some points off. And in this show, specifically Philadelphia Flower Show, some of these designs are very, very close in terms of the points that the judges are giving. So that 1 or 2 points that you might lose could knock you down to a second place. So this is where the passers can really come in handy. And so as we said, it's in your best interest to follow what they're suggesting. And you always want to put your best flowers forward. So in most cases, that passing, you have a little negotiation, your design gets passed. Occasionally, I will say that we are unable to pass a design for whatever reason. Let's say 1 year, there was feathers that were used, but they were so integral into the design that there was no way for us to, that the exhibitor could not change it. And so what happened in that case, and in other cases as well, that's not the only thing, they were allowed to show, they were an exhibit in the show, but they were not judged. So in that case, it would be placed with a tag that says for exhibit only. And so you would not receive a ribbon in that case. But again, this does not happen very often, but I'm just follow the rules. Okay, and so after your exhibit is done, just make sure you don't run away, because you do have to be there for passing so that if there's an issue, you can resolve it. Okay? Let's see. So, what are the passers, and what's the difference between passing and judging? So, the passers are fellow floral designers, first of all. And so most of us have experience entering the show. In fact, not just anyone can sign up to be a passer. You have to be invited to do so. And again, just please remember that we are there to help you. We're not trying to make your life more difficult. And we're there to enforce the show rules and conformance and just make sure everyone is exhibiting equally on the same foot. Okay, so judges are assessing distinction, creativity, interpretation, and the elements and principles of design, as Wendy mentioned. So that's different. So a passer is not going to tell you that you did not interpret, that this isn't a modern design, as it says in your class schedule. That is not something that a passer could tell you. We also can't tell you if your design is good, or if this is right, or something like that. But they can make other suggestions that you might wish to follow, especially things that are rule related. Sizing. They will get the rulers out. They will measure it. Is it 5 inches or less for the minis? Is it the size that it says on your in your class description? So, okay, next. All right, what are we looking for? Yeah, size restrictions. Is there fresh plant material, or is there dry plant material as directed by your class description? All plant material must be in water, as it says, unless you receive special permission. So as Wendy was showing some of those exhibits, her calla lilies, in some of them, were not in water. Okay, that is going to happen, but you need to get that approval ahead of time. So this is where we need to do the planning for your exhibit and how you've tested it. You've tested it at home. It was out of water for 3 days on your windowsill. Everything was fine. So you would need to email either me or Cecilia if you know in advance that you're going to be using plant material that won't be in water, and we'll kind of assess. There's some that we know for sure are going to be fine, and then we would say that's okay. If you wait till the day of the show, that puts us in a little bit of a bind, because we haven't heard from you before then. And as it says in the schedule, you need to get that pre-approved. So anyway, please contact us if you're not going to be putting things in water. Again, we're going to be looking for the not permitted list. Okay, this year is a new change. It also, the not permitted list includes things from the Pennsylvania state list of invasive species. So things like ivy, things like anything that's listed on that list is going to be something that the passers are looking for. Those items will not be on the nomenclature list. Is that correct?
We haven't made a final decision. They may remain with a mark so that it highlights things that you may have used in the past
Okay.
that you cannot use now.
Okay.
Just check the list.
Yeah.
Be very careful about checking the list.
Okay. We're going to be looking for the condition of the plant material. As I said, it can't have any bugs. It can't be dead or wilting. It can't be like have a hole in it. It can't be that. Yes?
When you said you have a list that you might put a red dot, where is the list?
So that's that nomenclature form that Wendy showed you?
What's on the nomenclature?
Yes, so you'll receive that in your mailing of all of your credentials and everything
Yeah.
else you need for the show. And it's a list that's largely a comprehensive list, but there are things that are missing. So, and we may
There's a spot.
have things on there that were allowed in the past that are not allowed now, there'll be a notation. And you can't go by, if it's not on the list, then it's invasive, because
Right.
there are things that don't end up on the list that you have to write in yourself. You
Yes.
really have to check the link in the letter that
Yes.
went out by email or on the website to make sure that you're not using something that's invasive in
And
Pennsylvania.
that's well in advance, so you wouldn't have your design all done and then you get this list a week before.
No, you'll get that in the
You'll
next
get it.
few weeks.
Yeah, in the next few weeks. You may not want to fill that out until hopefully you've done it before you've come to the show. Because as Wendy said, you can cross things off. So if you have your plant materials already selected, before you load everything in the car, you could quickly fill out your nomenclature form. And then when you get down there, let's say you decide not to use your tulips, just cross those off. That will make things simpler, because I guess I should add to this list, passers, I know I do this, passers will ask you for your nomenclature form, and they will sit there and look at your design and say, yes, tulips, yes, moss, yes, oh, you forgot to add this, or, oh, no, you didn't end up using the, so that's one of the things on the checklist that the passers will be doing. Okay, so yes, condition of plant material. My advice to you is always have extra, a little bit extra, 1 or 2 stems, especially of your main flowers. I can't tell you the number of times where we've said, hey, do you have another rose? This one is, starting to wilt. And someone will say, nope, that's what I have. So you have to sort of plan ahead anyway, because you're supposed to be maintaining your exhibit during the whole time that it's there. So if you come and you've used all of your roses, but you come back the next morning and they are dead, then what are you going to do? So try to have a little extra. If you've done your design and you need to buy more for maintenance, that's something you just sort of need to plan ahead for. Okay, so in some of the classes, they may allow backgrounds. Passers will also be making sure that the backgrounds fit well, especially in the minis. And I will be there looking for dirt and dust. So I find it helpful in those cases to have like a nice paintbrush or something that's you can easily sort of, after everything's all done, just gently brush your, even on the pedestals. Pieces of moss will kind of just trickle out and they'll be there, and that's something that the passer is looking for, because again, we want everything to be pristine, presented in its best condition. Okay? Mechanics. So that would be something, is your oasis showing, is any mechanic visible? Now, this is sort of where there's a little bit of a gray area, because you might say to me, well, that's integral to my design. Like, I want people to see that. And in certain cases, that might be true. Might be the lucite or the clear things that you have in your design. That might be part of it. In some cases, the water tubes might be part of your design. That could be something that you planned for it to be visible. If you're going to show wire, if that's going to be part of your design, make sure that it's neatly done. That way it will not be distracting in any way. So the passers might say, hey, I can see your container, top of your container here on this one side. They might say, oh, the back maybe could use a little bit more plant material. something like that. So anytime your mechanics are visible, it's something that the passers are going to let you know. And basically also following the rules, have the required number of components. So in the challenge class that someone might be signing up for, it might say use 2 out of 5 components must be used. So you get a choice of which ones you want to use, but you have to use at least 2. Okay? If you only use 1, then that might not pass. Okay? If there's required plant material stated, that sort of thing. So we will be looking, measuring, doing all that, and checking your nomenclature for it. So 2 passers are assigned, typically either a passer and the class chair, or 2 passers are assigned to each class, and they will be there when you arrive. They'll be there basically the whole time that you have, the 2 hours of design. And so while you're working, you can ask for what's called a preliminary pass. Instead of waiting till the very, very end at like 8:20, if you're supposed to be passed by 8:30, it is difficult to pass 4 or 5 people all at the same time. So what you can do is, if you're not quite sure, like, is this allowed? Is this size correct? Did I use my components? If you have any kind of question, you can sort of say, can I have a preliminary pass? And that's when it's great, because it's not 5 minutes before the end of your time. If we say, oh, yes, I think we need to add another component here, or, oh, the sizing is off, and you've told us, you've asked for the preliminary pass, an hour in, you still have an hour that you can make those adjustments. So it's great to head off any potential problems. So the passers are there, and as well as your class advisor, while you're doing your engagement. Okay, so again, we're trying to head off any potential problems early on and allow you plenty of time to correct anything that you might need to correct. Okay, so the pathing process. Passers cannot tell you. You can't say, hey, does this look right? Should I use this tulip? Should this go here? Okay, we can't really give feedback on your design decisions. We can only really answer questions on rules and requirements, okay, and condition of plant material. So are you sure you're ready for passing? I always suggest, once you get close, once you think you're kind of done, to kind of walk away, like turn around, maybe start packing your stuff up, maybe go for a quick little walk, don't go too far. I always like to take a photograph, actually. That way, it somehow switches the way you're looking at things, and you can sort of see, oh, there's a big hole there. Or, oh, yeah, that rose really doesn't look, I can see that, my eye goes right there. So that really helps you assess whether you're actually finished or not. And the reason I say this is because, in the next slide, once we put the red P on the top of your entry card, that means it's been passed. You cannot touch it. So after I say it's passed, you have to walk away. If you have walked away at that point and you come back and say, oh, there's this giant hole there, you can't come back and fix that, okay? So even if something ends up falling, that's sort of where we have once it's passed, there's some time when it takes, the judges to come a little bit. So just make sure your mechanics are solid, everything is fine. And basically, once it's passed, you've done everything you can do, and that's when the judges come in, and it's the judges' turn. Okay, so does anyone have questions about that? Yes?
How quickly, how much time is there between passing and the judges?
It sort of depends. Usually, I think it's like 10 or 15 minutes we usually give, but some judging panels, yeah, and some judging panels are running a little bit behind, so it could be like, it's usually between 10 minutes and, let's say, 45 minutes.
But a judging panel might be judging 4 classes.
Right. True. It could even be an hour.
2 or 3 hours.
Right. It could be, yeah. So if they're in charge of, like, let's say they're judging the minis, and then they have to go over to Galleria, and then, so, yeah, you might be, like, the 3rd or 4th class on their list. So it could be a little bit of time. It depends, honestly. Yes?
After the judging process, because the show has been out a week, are you allowed to touch it? Do you see anything drop?
The only thing you have come in for maintenance. So yes, in that particular, it would go that whole first day. and through the judging process if there were an issue. But the next morning when you come in for maintenance is when you could fix the leaking container, put your flower back in, make it, you can touch it at that time. Yes. Anything else? Okay. That's all right.
Passing is one of those jobs that seems maybe not as glamorous as some of the others, but it's one of the most important jobs on the floor, and the judges don't want to have to come in and worry about size. If something's passed, they're going to judge it. And I encourage you, if you are flower arrangers and want to be a passer, we're always looking for people, so sign up. So next we're a little behind time, so we'll kind of keep moving here. I wanted you to meet Rolanda. You can change the slide. She was a first-time entry last year. You can change the slide. You're trying. Okay. It wasn't an arrangement class. It was a doorway class, which she did with the team. But I think a lot of her experiences will be very relevant to you.
You are engaged in a team sport, okay? You might think this is your design, this is your project, but you are not alone in this. This is your friend, okay? I want to seem calm, cool, and collected so that I can demonstrate how I felt when I selected the exhibit that I was going to enter last year. It didn't last very long, okay? I got real nervous right after I said, oh, sure, I can do this, because members of my garden club had won the first prize in the door class the year before. They were calm, cool, and collected. I can do it. We gave everything we had to this project. We didn't hold back, and we had fun doing it. We learned how to create an exhibit. We developed a plan. There were 3 people on my team. Each one of us came to our first meeting with the idea of how we wanted to interpret a Philadelphia spring exhibit. And we all liked the idea of a kite for a wreath. So one of the team members knew an artisan who could create the wreath for us, okay? We set up a mock doorway. We got the door. We set up the porch platform with the exact dimensions. We set up the steps with the exact dimensions so that we could see what we were going to be doing. I had artificial flowers, and then I went to the thrift stores and I bought some artificial flowers there, and we put them all over the porch and all over the steps so that we could see what it might look like if we bought the real flowers. We selected a color for our door based on, I'm driving down Germantown Avenue, a historic property. Somebody's painting the door and the columns a beautiful color of yellow. And so we said, let's do that. It's gorgeous. We selected the flowers we were going to use. We Googled, what are the early spring flowers? Because for our exhibit, we had to have roots. These aren't cut flowers. These are growing flowers. So we selected pinks, yellow, blues, and whites. We decided we needed to force bulbs because we couldn't rely on the flowers being ready and to exhibit when we needed them. So I learned how to force bulbs. I had a refrigerator. You have to put them in the dirt. You have to keep them in the dark. You have to keep them for 3 weeks between 40 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And then for 12 weeks, you have to keep them between 34 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit in the dark. I had to buy another refrigerator for that, okay? We placed we placed our orders with the Philadelphia Horticultural Society, and the pansies, the violas, the Dusty Miller, they were just gorgeous. We went shopping at Home Depot to buy molding for the door, because they just give you a nice plain hollow core door. You have to make it look fancy. And then we went to Plan B, because cutting that molding and getting the mitered corners, someone donated 2 picture frames. We glued them on. We painted the door. We primed it. We painted it 3 times. The person in our team who had gotten the blue ribbon the year before introduced us to something called floral felt. There's one company that makes it, and it really saved us. We were going to use moss, okay, to make sure that the plants stayed where we wanted them to stay. The floral felt is much better, and it's reasonably priced, okay? One of our team members, who would not tell us where she got these plants, but she bought these 2 hellebores that were, each one was this tall, and they were this gorgeous shade of maroon and chocolate. So that became the focal point, and all the other plants we designed around it. We found some tall planters at Home Depot. Deanda had a welcome mat, brand new welcome mat that she had never used. We used that. We have a secret weapon. My granddaughter is a talented artist. When we did our designs and we couldn't figure out why doesn't this pop, we asked her to look at it. She says, "You need something orange." Well, we hadn't thought about orange, but we went out and got some orange pansies, okay, so to make it pop. It all came together nicely. And you can see that QVC really liked our exhibit, because they filmed to their 100 million viewers their exhibit using our door, their spring collection, okay? All of the things that have already been said, transporting stuff. I lashed and frapped all of the containers. I've ordered the U-Haul cargo van weeks in advance. You know you're gonna need it, and you know I have a little Nissan Sentra. There's no way I was going to be able to get this stuff there. Then I took all my extra blankets out of the closets, and I have like 3 closets that I store that kind of stuff in. Flannel sheets around. I didn't want anything to scratch. I didn't want anything to not be supported. You want to make sure that your van has heat and air conditioning, because you don't want your flowers to be too hot or too cold as they're being transported. And those sleeping policemen, oh my God. If it takes you 20 minutes to get from your house to the place, multiply that by 4. You're going to be going 15 miles an hour, because every single bump, you're looking at heart attack city, okay? Don't be afraid. If we had known everything before we started, we would never have taken the plunge, and we would have missed out on a wonderful learning experience. We asked everyone in our garden club of Philadelphia and vicinity for help. They helped. Some of our members came to my house and spent 2 days advising on the flow and the this and the that. It's not my award. 2 awards here. We got a red ribbon and we got a commendation. That little turquoise ribbon, that means that everybody in the class scored 95 points or higher. So there are 4 exhibitors. Everybody did a great job. You're going to be you're going to be going to nurseries and garden shops the week before the exhibit. No matter what you think you're going to put in the show, you're going to find that something's not ready, something has bloomed and it's past. It's not show quality by the time the show is coming on. So you're going to be going into all the garden stores to get whatever plant material they have. I didn't understand what passing was until the passer was there. We had so many plants listed, but if this doesn't work, then we can use this. They spent time eliminating all those plants that we didn't need, that we didn't use, because with global warming, last year, everyone experienced that bulbs bloomed 2 to 3 weeks before they had ever bloomed in the history of bulb blooming. So you have to be flexible. You have a plan, but you have to have a plan B and a plan C. It's going to work out just fine. PHS likes clay pots. Now, they'll tell you that you can use plastic if they're real pretty. Don't do that, okay? Get some beautiful clay pots so that you can exhibit your plants beautifully. They want the area to be spick and span. We went every morning at 6:30, and we deadheaded, we sprayed, we moved stuff around. We made sure that the steps and the porch were in pristine condition, because we wanted every person every day to have a wonderful experience looking at our exhibit. And so just don't be afraid, okay? Everyone here and everyone in your garden club wants you to be successful, and they will help. That was my experience, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to describe it.
Okay, that was a door entry. A flower arrangement is a hell of a lot easier than that, so. And you can see she survived and is enthusiastic. You're a great ambassador for this, it's great. We're a little bit behind time. These are 2 important topics left. If you're able to stay, I encourage you to try and hang in there a couple more minutes. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to try to speed through this as quickly as I can. We are going to pick up stuff that I don't get to today. Next week, I had already intended to move some of the stuff at the end of the talk to next week. I am happy to stay after, so if you guys have questions and you want more information, please stick around and I will talk to you after. And then if you're able to come back next week, we'll talk about some really important issues then as well. But anyway, I'm really happy to be here to talk to you about something that I'm very passionate about. I have a floral design business and I try to practice sustainable floristry as much as I can. But I'm not here to preach to you or to scold you or tell you what to do, although at some point I probably will say something like that because I have been accused of being the sustainability police. But my goal really is to just provide you with some information that maybe you haven't heard of before. And I really believe strongly that once you know better, you can do better. And this is a process. This is change that's going to take a little time. And so maybe you'll pick one thing up today that you can use moving forward. So sustainability is a huge topic, and we're going to focus on a little tiny piece of it. But to give you the broader picture, what is sustainability? And it is basically pursuing or creating and maintaining conditions where humans and nature can exist together in harmony to permit the social, economic, and environmental requirements of present and future generations. And it has 3 main components: people, planet, and profit, or you can think about it as equity or social sustainability, environmental sustainability, which is where we're going to focus today, and economic sustainability. And if you have questions about this, I'm happy to talk to you about that later. And sustainable floristry is basically the definition I already gave you, but it's tweaked to encompass the cut flower industry and then anybody working with flowers. And right now we're going to play a quick clip from the show The Good Place. If Gabrielle can find it, because it quickly sort of sums up the complexity of this problem around flowers and how in being environmentally sustainable in flowers can be challenging. The biggest authority in climate change, the IPCC, put out a report last March which basically issued a final warning. And it said, if we do not start making changes now, we are going to be seeing a global increase in temperatures and increasingly irreversible losses in our environment. So,
something nice, it backfires. There are so many unintended consequences to well-intentioned actions. It feels like a game you can't win.
That's it. There is another explanation. Unintended consequences. Oh, Tahani, you did it.
Well, of course I did, darling. Did what?
All along, I've only been looking at one duck, but there's millions of ducks in here. In 1534, Douglas Weingart of Hawkhurst, England, gave his grandmother roses for her birthday. He picked them himself, walked them over to her. She was happy. Boom, 145 points. Now, yeah, here we go. In 2009, Doug Ewing of Skaggsville, Maryland, also gave his grandmother a dozen roses, but he lost 4 points. Why? Because he ordered roses using a cell phone that was made in a sweatshop. The flowers were grown with toxic pesticides, picked by exploited migrant workers, delivered from thousands of miles away, which created a massive carbon footprint, and his money went to a billionaire racist CEO who sends his female employees pictures of his genitals. Woo!
That is a very odd thing to cheer.
Don't you understand? The bad place isn't tampering with points. They don't have to. Because every day the world gets a little more complicated, and being a good person gets a little harder.
So that gives you an idea of, social issues related to flowers, environmental issues and it's a very complicated topic, but it's stuff that we don't talk about often, that we don't educate ourselves on because we just don't even know to, and it's stuff that we need to think about. Basically, how does this apply to us in floristry? And the stuff that we need to think about. So floral foam is a huge hot button issue. It's something we need to talk about. And we're going to talk about today why floral foam is a problem. Buy local and seasonal flowers whenever you can. That's really hard for the beginning of March show. And it's unclear yet if you order flowers from California, if that's better than ordering flowers from Ecuador. And there's an amazing woman. I encourage you to look her up on social media. Her name is Becky Feasby, Prairie Girl Flowers. She is an incredible voice in sustainable floristry, and she's actually doing a PhD program at Harvard, and her thesis is looking exactly at this. She's looking at where flowers come from and all of the components of sustainability that impact where those flowers come from and how we get them in our hands. And hopefully we'll have some answers to some of these questions soon. And to just give you an idea of how she's looking at it, one of her professors did a study where he looked at everything, all of the components of sustainability and how they relate to plastic grocery bags versus paper, and actually found that plastic grocery bags are more sustainable than paper grocery bags. Now, bringing your reusable one is the best way to go, but it just shows you how complicated and how not obvious the answers sometimes are. So can you just back up one? The other thing we need to think about, take care of your soil. I am a huge soil nerd. My friends roll their eyes and are like, oh God, she's talking about soil again, because that's how much I like soil. Healthy soil can save the world. I know that's a crazy statement to make, but it's true, and I'm working on a talk that can explain the reason why I say that. So take care of your soil. Compost, get green waste out of the landfill. If you don't have the wherewithal or the space to do it yourself, there are tons of companies who will come pick up a bucket once a week at your house, and it's really not that expensive. Limit single-use plastics. We have to stop using the plastic sleeves on our flowers. Advocate with your florists, with the wholesalers, with whoever wants to listen to you say it. because it's completely not necessary, and there are parts of the country that will not. I don't think Europe allows plastic sleeves on flowers, so we have to stop it because it's nothing more than garbage. Advocate for more sustainable practices at your wholesalers. So tell your wholesalers you want local flowers, you want certified American grown flowers, which is a sustainable certification. And we need to advocate for more socially just practices in cut flower industry in general. We're going to talk about imported flowers in a little bit, but there are some serious social justice issues in this industry, and we also have to advocate for more inclusivity. Floristry is a largely white profession. We need to bring everyone into this profession. So these are just things that we need to think about. Next slide. So why is floral foam a problem? Next slide. It is essentially a single-use plastic, which I did not know. It's a petroleum-based product that is made up of very harmful chemicals that are bad for the environment, but also human health. Things like carbon black and formaldehyde. We have all used floral foam. And when it's dry, it's dusty, it gets on your hands, you breathe it in. When you soak it in the sink and you pull that block out to use in your arrangement, we all are familiar with that green sludge that's in the bottom of your sink that we are now washing down the drain. What are we washing down the drain? Microplastics. There is one of the biggest suppliers of floral foam is a company that practices a significant amount of greenwashing, and greenwashing basically means deceptive marketing by a company to claim that something is environmentally friendly when it actually is not. Floral foam is sold and marketed as enhanced biodegradability. It does degrade, or biodegrade, means organisms break it down, in perfect laboratory environments. A landfill is not a perfect laboratory environment, but even if this stuff breaks down, it's breaking down not to components of our natural environment. It doesn't help the soil. It's breaking down to microplastics. Microplastics go into our waterways and they kill aquatic life. And these particles never, ever, 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 ever go away. They are with us forever. So we need to start thinking about what are we doing. We work with nature's beauty, and we're sticking them in plastic, and we're creating an environmental problem. So this is the one time when I'm going to say we have to stop using floral foam. This is a really important thing to do. And I've heard the argument, we all have the box in the basement. You know, isn't it better for me to just use it than to throw it in the landfill now? And I can't answer that question for you. Everybody has to make their own choices. What I did with my floral foam, and by the time I learned all this, I was already in a business, so I had a number of boxes. I didn't want to use them as much for my own health as for the environmental issues. And so I took the boxes and gave them to a florist who I had not been able to convince to stop using floral foam. So in my mind, I prevented 3 new boxes from being ordered. You guys could do that, or you can use your foam until it runs out. But I'm going to challenge you with this. If you do that, what happens when the box is empty? Are you going to learn then about how to practice floristry without foam, or are you going to buy another box? So just start thinking about that. Next slide. So what do we do without foam? So first of all, foam didn't exist until 1954 or 56. Amazing floral designers and amazing floral arrangements were created. This picture here, and I hope you guys can see it, was created by a friend of mine, TJ McGrath, an amazing designer in New Jersey. He did this for the New York Botanic Garden Orchid Dinner. And it's meant to be an urn of like spilling out all its flowers and water. This is a completely foam-free design. Not a bit of foam. You could do anything without foam. How do we do it? Well, first and foremost, flowers like water. So if you can design in a vessel, that's what you should do. But you need a mechanic. So what are the things you can use? Chicken wire, branches balled up, pin frogs and pin cups and hairpin holders. I have examples here to show you if you're not familiar with this sort of stuff. You can design in sand. If you get the ratio of sand and water correct, it's an excellent mechanic, and it is an excellent way to give your flowers water. Moss, maybe. So moss has its own environmental issues. It's very slow growing, and we will run out of it. So I encourage you to use moss very thoughtfully. And then, of course, water tubes, which often integrate beautifully into your design. But what about the times when you need the foam alternative? Like you need something that's not in a container, you need it suspended, you need a water source that only foam has ever given us. So there are potentially maybe more, but the three that I'm going to talk about are viable options, although I focus on one and I think it's really probably the only one that's going to work. The first is Ocean Pouch. This is a fully home compostable mechanic. It is made up of coconut coir, which is basically this because one of them busted open, and some other additives that are plant-based and entirely compostable. And then it has a home compostable shell. You just prick it with a skewer and you soak it in water for like 5 to 7 minutes, and this thing gets super plump. It's a very, very good mechanic. It is not the best water source. It is intended for day of design. So for event work that I do, it works well. You get a water source for a period of time. For a 3-day entry in a flower show, probably not your best option. But I just wanted to show it to you anyway, so you guys were familiar with some of the other things on the market. It also isn't sunflower's best friend. So if you are going to use it, it's something you need to experiment with and figure out what flowers like it and which ones don't. The next one that we're going to talk about, I'm going to jump down to the end of the list. Sorry, next slide. Oh, no, we're in the right slide. Sorry. Is foam PHOAM. It's a product that is being developed and I think it's supposed to hit the market soon. It's being billed as like the environmentally friendly response to floral foam. And I was super excited about it when I first heard about it. I've since found out that it is a plant-based plastic. That's the same stuff that's like around your dishwasher pods and your laundry detergent pods, which I was like all on board for until I learned that plant-based plastics break down to microplastics. So in the right environment, which is typically industrial composting systems, that will break down into, I think it might be carbon dioxide and water. I'm not entirely sure. But most of the time, we're not disposing of these things in the perfect environment. A lot of us don't have access to industrial composting unless you have a service. So I think that's something that may not be the good alternative that we had hoped it was. And I do need to learn a little bit more about the science behind this stuff. So the thing that I use whenever I need a foam alternative is something called Agri-Wool. This is sold by one company in the U.S. called New Age Floral. The big floral supply company also has a product that's similar. I do not actually know what's in that product, and I try not to buy from that company. So I use this. This is made of basalt rock dust. Basalt rock dust is technically a non-renewable resource, but there is so much of this stuff on this planet, we will never run out of it. It is spun together with either a cane sugar or a corn sugar, so you get this block, and it holds water really well. The things that are not great about it, it doesn't have the same integrity as foam. If you stick a gazillion stems in it, first of all, it's going to leak water like crazy, so be aware of that when you're using it, but it will break apart at some point. So I have learned 2 things that can help with that. So the first thing that I do always is I encase it in a compostable bag. This is home compostable, so that's the gold standard in composting. So you soak it, you put it in this, which helps hold the water, and it even will make you another little reservoir of water that the block can suck up when the flowers drink from it, because a lot of stuff's going to come out of it when you design. And you can prick through these bags easily. And the next thing, because I'm typically using this in very large scale designs, so I then encase it in chicken wire, so it helps to hold the block together, and it actually gives me another mechanic. And I'll pass this around. Yes?
You know the cage as well that
Yes.
they use for flower foam? Could you use that?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. You just have to be aware, if you had just these 2 things together, this whole thing with your flowers could go into compost. If you have the chicken wire on it or plastic, you have to take it apart. I actually always take mine apart because I don't compost this. This is an excellent soil conditioner. So I just break it up and I sprinkle it in my garden. It has tons of minerals, micronutrients, and it actually, if you want to get really woo-woo, which I tend to get when I talk about soil, it has been shown to have significant energetic properties related to soil, so it wakens up the soil life, and you see a lot more activity when you add basalt to soil. So the other thing to think about when you're using this is it doesn't work exactly the same way foam does. It has a grain, and so inserting stems with the grain is really easy. Inserting stems against the grain can be difficult. Think woody stems, roses, chrysanthemums, branches, no problem. Make a diagonal cut and you're in no problem. But more tender stems can be difficult, so I use a skewer, a pencil, even a woody stem scrap to make a hole before you insert a more tender, delicate stem. I have found that things last beautifully in this. I haven't had stuff die on me. I think it's an excellent water source. It can be a very good mechanic if you're not overloading it. And it is, and actually, a mechanic that is good for the environment that can replace something that is incredibly harmful. So I encourage you to learn about this. It's a little bit more expensive than foam, and probably over time that price will come down. It comes in blocks like this. It comes in sheets, I think. And it also comes in these little puck things that I think were meant for seed starting. But this is a perfect size if you need just a flower or two in a suspended design. Yes?
Where do you get it?
It's a company called New Age Floral. It comes from, it might be Holland, I'm not sure, and they're the importers in this country, somewhere in Europe. So you could, this is a scenario where maybe a tiny bit of moss, even Spanish moss, tied with a little bit of twine, hides a mechanic, and you have a perfect water source. It's lightweight, it's easy to use. And I think that this is the time to start learning about that stuff. I am going to skip this bottom part, and if anybody wants to, if you don't know what a hydration chamber is and you want to know about it, just come talk to me after.
Do you ever cut the agro wool to make sure that the flowers are like with the grain?
I don't, because you have actually less integrity in the material if you're coming in this way. If you're doing a design where you're kind of hitting flowers from every angle, you can, but I would use the other two techniques, and I would still do a lot of my piercing from the top. Next slide. Okay, we're going to use the last few minutes to talk about imported flowers. I did not know this in any way, shape, or form. My sister used to harp on me, stop putting those flowers you got from the grocery store on the counter. Stop putting them in the plastic juice container. It has tons of chemicals, and I would roll my eyes and think, there's my nutty sister again, but she was right. So flowers coming from overseas have a huge carbon footprint. That's obvious to all of us, right? Because they're traveling thousands of miles. The other thing to think about is they're coming thousands of miles out of water. So that has, there's two issues with that. One is they've been out of water for a long time. So what does that mean for the life of the flower or the look of the flower? But the other thing is, because of that, we have bred these bionic flowers, which sounds like a good thing, maybe, except that they're all these perfectly straight stems. They have no personality. They have no scent. It's not the beautiful romance of the garden flower that is really what nature intended. So, what are we doing? Sorry.
What are we doing? sorry.
The other thing is, there is a huge environmental cost in the areas where these flowers are grown. Toxic pesticides are rampant. Fertilizer is rampant. And let me just, as an aside, because I have to mention soil again, when you have healthy soil, you don't actually need to fertilize. You never, ever, 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 I promise you, if your soil is working and healthy, you don't need fertilizer. And what happens when you overuse fertilizer and pesticides? You have runoff. You degrade your soil even more. You pollute your waterways. Then the people doing this stuff get sick. This is a picture of someone spraying, I think, in Ecuador. This guy has some protective gear. Most farms do not give their workers any protective gear at all. Then they don't have health care. They don't have proper working conditions. There are child labor violations. There is a lot of sexual assault on these farms. This is a huge social justice issue. They are also not paid living wages. The good news is there are some sustainable farms popping up in South America. Rosa Prima is one of them. They actually have more female executives than males. They have amazing health care. They're integrating integrative pest management and things like that. So we need to be on the lookout for those things. We need to be using American-grown flowers as well. Next slide. And then the part that really gets me from a personal standpoint is the pesticide use. So there's rampant pesticide use. There's residue on the flowers when we get them. There is a clear connection between human health, things like cancer, endocrine disorders, and other diseases, and pesticides. And there was a study done between 2016 and I think 2019 in Belgium with florists, and they looked at the residues on the three biggest cut flowers: roses, gerbers, and chrysanthemums. They looked at the residue on florists' hands, and they looked at what was in their urine. And they found consistency across those three areas, which showed us that there's very significant pesticides on the flowers. It's getting on people's hands, and it's being absorbed into the body. And we may not be using flowers at the same degree as a Belgian florist, but we're doing this too. We're bringing these flowers home from the florist to the grocery store. What are we doing? We're opening them on the kitchen counter. We're taking that plastic sleeve and it's going in the trash. We're designing those flowers. Maybe we're swiping it into the trash or hopefully the compost. And then maybe you wiped up your counter because it was dirty. Maybe you washed your hands and then you made dinner. Or maybe your kids played with those flowers, or maybe you were eating a bagel while you were designing. You know, do we ever really think about that? And what they found, 107 chemical residues, 50% were pesticides, 46% were fungicides, 4% were growth regulators and herbicides. And some of these things were reaching concentrations 1,000 times greater than what's allowed in food, and a lot of these chemicals are banned in food. And I took a wedding design class at Longwood, and the teacher was a 30-year veteran of the wedding industry. And when she got to the cake design class, I said to her, "Where do you get your flowers for your cakes?" And she kind of looked at me funny, and she said, it's the leftover flowers, or I just order extra or whatever. It's the same flowers, these flowers, that she sticks in cakes. And the vast majority of florists out there do this because they are completely unaware. I have not eaten a wedding cake in, 10 years, and I will never eat one again unless I'm the one putting the flowers in the cake. So, we don't know this stuff because nobody talks about it, but this is important stuff. A lot of us eat organic food, and then we design with these flowers on our counter, and we contaminated our kitchen and our kids and all of it. Stuff to think about. So one last study from Ecuador, which is the third leading cut flower region in the world. Yes?
Could we connect with you after this in order to get the titles of these studies so that we can read them?
Yes, and I will in the follow-up email, I'll send a list of resources, local farms, things like that. Absolutely. And you can always call me. Obviously I'm pretty passionate about this, so I'm always happy to talk about it. And especially if you want to talk about soil, I'm really. So anyway, they looked at kids in the region, not just kids who worked on the farms, but all the kids in the region from about the month before Mother's Day to 100 days after, which is peak flower growing time. And they found significant changes in neurologic behavioral changes in these children. Things like visual spatial processing, hand-eye coordination, stuff that affects their ability to function in the world, in school, etc. And what you have to realize is they looked at a finite period of time, and they called this short-term changes, but these kids are exposed to this stuff all year long. The flower production spikes at different times of the year, but it's there all the time, and even if they're not on the farms, their mom and dad work on the farm, and they don't have protective gear, and they bring all those chemicals home. We need to think about this because this is a significant problem. Yes?
This might be way off. I guess what I thought about when you were saying all that, Christmas trees.
I actually have no idea how Christmas trees are grown or if they require chemicals. That's something to learn.
I just thought about the whole family and that whole thing and decorating and the things that we find in our house years later or in the car, those spindles everything.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like I said in the beginning, this is an enormous topic, and even the tiny pieces of it are enormous. But we all need to open our eyes and start learning, and then start really being thoughtful about our decisions. And I understand stuff isn't going to change and happen overnight, but it's stuff that we need to think about. And so the next couple of topics, invasive species, which we already mentioned, we've changed this year, and then painted, dyed, and bleached flowers, we're going to talk about next week. They're important issues. If you can't make it next week and you want to talk about it today, like I said, I am happy to stay and go over things with you. There's a video that I want to play. We're not going to do it today because we're out of time. Hopefully we'll play it next week, and I'm also going to attach it in the email. It is a TED Talk by a leading climate change scientist. It's 10 minutes. I was going to play the first 3 minutes for you. If you can watch the full 10 minutes, please do. It is worth the watch. Thank you so much. Sorry I rushed, but I'm here to talk later.